Hello, everyone, and welcome to Advanced Gold Exploration's live event hosted by Six. I'm pleased to introduce their speaker for today, CEO Jim Atkinson. Jim will go over a quick presentation, and afterwards we will be accepting questions, so feel free to submit them in the bottom right corner of your screen there in the chat box. As always, this summit is being recorded and will be available on Six.com to watch afterwards. So without further ado, I'll hand things over to you to kick things off, Jim.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very happy to talk to people about what we're doing with advanced gold exploration. This is a reiteration of our original company, which was called Advanced United Holdings. And because of some input I had from people, brokers, including some of the ones that I know well, they thought that as a gold company, we should have gold in our name. So we changed the name to Advanced Gold Exploration, Inc. And I'd just like to talk a little bit about what we think we can do, what we can do. And our theme for this whole thing is this is simple. And the reason why that's the theme is because we think that it's simple to do what we plan to do. You just have to have the right plan in the first place. And we think now's the time for gold. Everybody knows the price of gold is going crazy. I heard this morning, I think that they said it was up to 2,100. The presentations I've heard lately from various letter writers, but also from important investors like Frank Justra and Rod McEwen, is that they're forecasting gold to be 2,200. Rob McEwen, I don't know if you know him, but he's been forecasting $5,000 gold for a long time. But anyway, I think now's the time to be really focusing on gold. So, and as I said, what you read from the letter writers is exactly this, that it's time for the juniors to come out of this slump that we've been in. A lot of letter writers and pundits, if you want to call them that, are comparing them to the 2016 buying levels where, if you bought at that level, you rode a very significant wave of advancement of prices. Again, people who are letter writers are saying these kind of things that, we have reached, I love this line, we have reached escape velocity above 2,000 an ounce. And, we've seen a little resistance while we're past that already, I think. And I think it's time for gold. So it's very simple what we plan to do. We plan to go from point A to point B, which is basically have a good company, good people, good projects, advance the projects to point B, which is to sell them or have, people that know how to do the production part of it come in. And in this aspect, we haven't really changed from sort of what was our mantra under Advanced United Holdings. And that was, we don't want to be a miner. We don't know how to mine. We do know how to explore. So our job is to go with good projects and people and a good company to go from having these things and going to a point where we get people who are willing to buy the properties and develop them. So step one is to have a tight capitalization in the company. This is where we are. We're having good insider support and good support from our associates. So that's a good company. We also have in step two experienced management and directors. And myself, I've been in the business for 50 years. I've been involved in various discoveries. And one of the most interesting things I think we did recently was to take a small gold property, which we had in the Wawa area. It at the time was 500 hectares. We expanded the property up to 10,000 hectares. And we got another company called Angus Gold to come in and buy us out for cash and shares. The shares were distributed to our shareholders. The company at that time was called Talisker. Talisker eventually became part of a merger that formed Advanced United Holdings, which is now Advanced Gold Exploration. Our CFO is very experienced, Radovan. He's the president and CFO of McLaren Resources. He's also a director and corporate secretary of some other junior mining exploration companies. But more importantly, he has a lot of experience in capital management, with orthogonal and other companies. And Rados also has a lot of experience sort of looking after the corporate side of things, and we'll be relying on him for that. We have Walter Henry, who's a well-known independent director and as a certified director under the corporate director certification. He's also chairman and CEO of various companies, has a lot of experience in the business. Rodney Ireland is also an independent director. He's well known in the Toronto area as a good marketing contact. He's raised money. One of the most interesting, or two of the most interesting things he's done is something called Bay Street Radio and Corporate Coffee, which is at the St. Regis on Wednesdays, and a bunch of executives and various people get together and just have a cup of coffee or whatever suits and discuss. Sometimes we discuss projects, sometimes we discuss the state of the industry. So I think the third step in keeping this simple is to have great projects. We have 3 very good gold projects. Our first that I'd like to talk about is Melba, which is a former gold mine situated in the Kirkland Lake area. It's about 15 kilometers north of Kirkland Lake, and it's sort of halfway between what would be Kirkland Lake and the Ross mine, and also the Black Fox mine, which is McEwen's operation in the north by Matheson. I guess the thing about Melba that I think is interesting is that it has gold-bearing veins on surface. And this area is actually mainly surrounded by swamp. However, there is one large outcropping of rocks, let's call them, mainly volcanic rocks that stick up out of the swamp. And on this outcropping, you actually have at least four quartz veins which host gold. You can see visible gold in the veins on surface, and you can see from the samples collected, you can get very high results, 14, 22 grams, and even from channel samples, where we got channel samples up to 73 grams, 135 grams over 1 meter. These are in the quartz veins at surface. Last year in the fall, we did a drilling program. We intersected results in the quartz veins up to 17 grams over a meter. But the thing that I think is most interesting about Melba is the fact that we discovered a sort of a new style of gold mineralization there, which gives it a little more potential. And that's basically related to pyrite disseminations in dikes. And these dikes, which range up to 6 or 8 meters in widths, have anomalous gold from throughout the whole of the dike. And what we think is the potential there is to actually try to locate where the higher grade parts of these dikes are. These dikes have never been drilled or even explored before. And quite frankly speaking, we found them by accident when we were drilling other targets. And we haven't really properly even got on the site to locate where these dikes were. The drilling was completed just when the snow came, so we couldn't really go out there and try to understand the disposition of these dikes and how they were located, where they trended, all that kind of stuff. And the other thing about Melba, it has a small resource, and this is from some underground workings that were put in before the First World War. The workings are still available, although they're not accessible because they're actually full of water. There was some work done back in the day in these workings, mapping the veins in the workings and coming up with this resource. Again, it's a non-43-101 compliant resource, but it was done by some people who I would consider fairly reliable. The other thing which is very interesting is that all of the material that was mined from the underground workings, approximately 4,000 tons, are still remain on the surface and potentially would be available for anybody that wanted to access them. The other property that we have that I'm very interested in is called Doyle. This is located in the Batchewana Greenstone Belt, very large property. But I think the thing that excites me most about Doyle is that it has been compared to Hemlo, which, as we know, has mined over 21 million ounces of gold. And the reason that I'm confident to say that it resembles Hemlo was because this was actually studied back in the late 60s and early 70s by a man who actually was one of the persons that discovered Hemlo. And so he worked for Lac Minerals at the time. His name is Robert Valiant. And his evaluation of the geology and the mineral distribution at Doyle really got, made him believe that this is something that resembles Hemlo quite a lot. They have they did a lot of work there. We have some drillings that have identified high grade gold intersections. Just to back up a bit, it's, as I said, located in the Batchewana Greenstone Belt, just north of Sault Ste. Marie. And back to the Hemlo Doyle comparison. This is a map put together by Robert Valiant, and he called the project Sioux at that time. But you can see that the Doyle and the Hemlo are very similar in their geological distribution. And even if you don't know geology, you can see there's lots of purples and yellows and pinks that are all in kind of the same kind of places. And I think that's very exciting. So we know there's gold there. Some of the drill holes have intersected very high grade gold, 46 grams in drill hole 22, 14 grams in drill hole 34. And drill hole 34 is a little more interesting because it actually occurs, the 14 grams occurs in a zone that's 9 meters thick. And this is a zone of disseminated pyrite in felsic volcanics, very similar to the kind of mineralization that you would see at a deposit like Hemlo. We also have some gold in massive sulfides, which would be more similar to something that you would see at Agnico Eagle's mine in Quebec. So the other thing that we did recently was we actually acquired a property, and I'll tell you an interesting story afterwards about that. But this property is called Landrum, and it's situated in the Carolina Gold Belt. And a lot of people don't realize, but Carolinas was the first gold rush in the United States. It was even before they had the gold rush in California. And you can still pan gold in some of the streams in the area. There are at least 5 past producers in the Carolina Gold Belt, which includes North and South Carolina, but also extends into Georgia and a little bit up into West Virginia. Now, there is one producer still operating in the Carolina Gold Belt. That's the Hale mine, which is owned by Oceana Gold, and they have 2.5 million ounces of proven and probable, and about 3 million ounces of M&I. So a significant deposit. They probably mined at least 2 million ounces again already. So it's a very deposit. And one of the things that's come out of the work in South Carolina and the work in Newfoundland is that the geology of the two has been compared very favorably. And anybody that knows the geology of the Appalachian Mountains knows that these long belts of similar geology occur all the way from, well, in the United States, from Georgia, all the way in through Newfoundland, and actually all the way over to Europe. So it's a long belt of very similar type geology and potentially similar type gold mineralization. Here's a map quickly showing the location of Landrum, Hale, Ridgeway, Rattlesnake, and Barite Hill, which were the other operations in the area. Hale, as I said, still in operation in the area, right? The other interesting story about Landrum is that when we optioned the property, we asked for a 5-mile area of influence. And what that means is that any projects that are developed by ourselves or by the optionor within 5 miles become part of the same agreement. And when we did that, we actually ended up getting another deposit, which is called Faulkner. Faulkner is a very interesting project. It's had one drill hole in it, which actually had gold. Mainly people were looking at Faulkner Mountain because it's a big altered porphyry, and they were trying to work out, with the relationship of the porphyry to mineralization, and in the drilling actually discovered the quartz vein there with some gold in it. Now the interesting thing again for those of you who are geologically oriented, Faulkner is an epithermal type target. And what that means is that it has similarities to the kinds of gold deposits you would find, say, in Nevada, Arizona, that kind of area. The Landrum mine itself actually covers a past producing mine as well as extensions of the veins, which are very similar to orogenic type occurrences. Again, a little bit of history. Landrum mine has been started to be mined in the 1850s. It was mined intermittently up until the Second World War, and does have a small resource. Again, historic, non-43-101, but again, calculated by people that I would consider to be reliable. So, 68,000 ounces of gold. And an original compilation was done, which actually showed that the ore plunge is still open along strike and down dip, and it's still unexplored. The whole project is unexplored along strike to the north and south. To the south of the main Landrum deposit, there's actually another occurrence which really has had no exploration done out at all. And again, Faulkner Mountain, as we mentioned, epithermal gold near an altered porphyry, and that has never been followed up. So again, keeping things simple, we'll have some news flow over the next while. We expect to begin exploration in the South Carolina properties, further sampling, geophysics, some geological work. We're thinking about expanding some of the soil geochemistry that was done there. So it'll be a program done over this winter. It's South Carolina, so it's a great place to work in the wintertime. We will also be reviewing some results of a compilation that we had done in the Rattlesnake area. The Rattlesnake is adjacent to the former producing Ridgeway mine, and we have some ideas in that area for some acquisition. We have announced a flow-through financing of up to $500,000 per share, and this will fund winter drilling at Doyle and at Melba. Both of those two areas, although in Ontario, Melba is, as I mentioned, surrounded by swamp, so winter drilling is really the way to go there. And Doyle has some access issues, and the way to get to that one is actually along a river, and the river will have to wait till it freezes. So I like this picture. So we believe in boots on the ground. Funny story about these boots. These boots were actually in a garage at one of our field men, one of his garages on his property, and it actually unfortunately had a fire and burned up. So these boots don't exist anymore. They got burned up in that fire, but we still believe in boots on the ground. This is the contact information, and if you want to go to our website, that's available, advancedgoldexploration.com, and has more details if you're interested. If you're interested in more of the technical details, there are two presentations on our website, the shorter one that I've just run through, and a much longer one, which has a lot more technical details on the properties and on the company itself. Anyway, that's sort of what I wanted to talk about. I'll throw it open for questions. Anyone has any questions, just contact me.
Thank you, Jim. And for anyone that came in late to the chat, just a reminder that we are accepting questions in the bottom right corner of your screen. I guess I'll kick things off. I do see one question in here, but with the new name change, is there a new vision or a change of plans going forward?
Well, only in the sense that we'll be focusing more on gold. We actually have a couple of copper properties in the company as well. And of course, copper is always good to have. But I think we want to focus on our gold exploration. I think one of the things that is happening is people are starting to realize that gold is the place to beat inflation, to beat bad currency, all of those kinds of things. And I think there's a movement, or there will be more of a movement towards acquiring gold. I think the other thing that's happening, and this is something that should be happening, is that all of the major producers of gold in the world are running out of gold. That gold is a depleting asset. So they will be looking for opportunities to get into companies that have exploration projects or maybe have some small resources. I think if you can show that you have potential for reaching their criteria, which are, maybe as much as 1 million or 2 million ounces, whatever it is, that you will attract some interest in the projects that you have.
Thank you, Jim. Now, for the new investors to the story, you have a lot of irons in the fire. If you were to pick one asset or project as a flagship asset or one that people should really look at or consider, what would you say?
Well, I think I would say it in two parts. First of all, for American shareholders, I think Landrum Faulkner Mountain is a very interesting prospect because, again, it's in the U.S. It has advantages of the U.S. Geological Survey and the U.S. government actually pouring lots of money into fundamental exploration activities. Of course, most of the money that they're focusing are for critical metals. However, the work that they're doing, airborne geophysics and regional surveys and mapping and all those kinds of things, actually help all kinds of exploration. So that would be my pick for, I think, for anyone in America that wants to sort of participate in the activities going on there. For Canadians, it's kind of a toss-up between Melba and Doyle. I think I would pick Doyle simply because it hasn't been explored since the early 90s, and it does have some uh, tremendous opportunities, based on its comparison with Hemlo. And as we know, it took 83 holes to discover Hemlo, so maybe we still have a ways to go at Doyle. Doyle has the slight complication of having access issues, and let me just explain what that is. So Doyle is in an area in the Batchewana Greenstone Belt north of Sault Ste. Marie, and several of the townships in that area were actually privately owned by Algoma Central Railroad back in the days. And Algoma Central was given these townships to own as a sort of a reward for building railroads and that. So the Doyle property, although it occurs on Crown land, which allows us to stake claims and do that, it is actually surrounded by private land. And there are some access issues with some of the private landowners, which we're working through. And if we get them straightened out before winter, obviously that's how we'll access the property. If not, we can access the property by traveling down the Montreal River, which is a very large river that occurs at the north boundary of the property. So it's going to be one of those two. But again, winter is the time when we have to do that.
Thank you, Jim. Now I'm going to go back to the chat here. We do have a few questions. Kenneth is wondering, do you have an estimation on when you want to start drilling and how many meters?
Yes, I'd like to start drilling later on in January because that's when things will be frozen up well and you can make good roads and things. And I think we'll probably try to get about 2,000 meters. And I think it will be distributed. I want to do just a reconnaissance program at Melba, basically trying to track down and follow up some of the dikes that have mineralization. So that'll be a smaller program, but the main program will really be at Doyle, and that'll probably be in the order of, I don't know, 1,500 meters. That kind of order of magnitude, and that'll be testing the 3 or 4 targets we have that we've identified where there's known gold, and where we think that gold needs to be followed up.
In terms of financing, are you looking at or opposed to royalty financing?
Not at all. We're open to any kind of financing. Royalty financing would be fantastic, and to have a good partner like that would be very desirable.
But no discussions of it in the short term anyway?
We haven't had any discussions on that. I do know some companies and some people that actually are not averse to taking royalties in sort of, let's call them, undeveloped properties or prospective properties, and I'll be working with some of those. I haven't spent a lot of time on that, although I do have sort of in the back of my mind and on my notes a list of people that should be contacted for that.
Great. Thank you, Jim. To conclude, we have one more question in the chat, and it's a nice one to wrap up. So, and I will just add on to it as well. But Kenneth is wondering, what is your long-term vision for the company? And I'll add on, what are the catalysts for 2023, or my apologies, 2024?
I guess the long-term vision of the company is, as I said, is to get, projects to the point where they become of interest to another company who are looking for gold resources, who are looking for expanding their portfolios, and basically sell them or partner with them, or do something to move the properties to the stage where perhaps they become development projects, or perhaps they become projects that require a lot more money than we have. And that would be my long-term goal. Catalysts for 2024, I think, are going to be the exploration at Landrum in South Carolina is going to be very exciting. I'll tell you a story about Landrum. So when I went to Landrum to do the site visit, I picked up 4 rocks that were there on the surface from past workings. All 4 of those rocks had gold, including one sample at 117 grams. And I said, I'm either really good at finding gold or there's lots of gold here. And I think it's the second one. So I think that's going to be a major news flow for us. That'll be probably late January, early February. I think Doyle drilling will also give us some very good results. The Melba drilling, I think, will be a little more technical. I mean, it would be very nice to hit a very high grade mineralization in one of these dikes. But I think my reality would be that, Melba, the drilling in the dikes is going to be mainly trying to understand where the gold is in those dikes. So those would be my catalysts for 2024.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jim, and thank you everyone that attended and asked questions. If you did come in a little late, there is a recording, and it will be available on YouTube probably within the day, if not tomorrow. Is there any closing remarks that you would like to leave the audience, Jim?
No, I don't think so. I think we've covered it very well. I just want everybody to remember that, what we're trying to do is basically fairly simple. We just want to take the company from point A, where it has good properties, good people, and a good company, to point B, where we have an asset that can be valued in a monetary sense, either by selling, by joint venturing, by having someone even maybe take over the company. And that's basically the message that I'm trying to get across.
Perfect. Message received. Thank you so much, Jim. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.